Hi, this is John. Here's a first tutorial in creating a game based on a new model of movement. This is a space game, and we're basing it loosely on a 1979 game with a similar movement dynamic. There's a group of images that I will email to you that we'll be using in this tutorial. Let's create a new blank project. Call it Squares. I'm going to make it for iPhone. You may want to make it for MacBook so that you have a larger space to work with. I'm making it for iPhone so that I can keep this a small video and everything can be nice and large on the screen. So let's go into our initial screen and we can drag in all of the images. And use the entire area of the video. Our player character is a rocket. We're going to add our rocket to the scene, and rather than up, down, left, right motion as we've been looking at, this is going to use a rotate and thrust model of motion. So we're going to create a rule for our rocket that when we press the right arrow key, our behavior will be to rotate clockwise. I'm naming it rotate right. I can take this entire rule. If I hold down the Option key, while I click and drag, I can duplicate. That's a very handy, quick tool. I'll call this one rotate left. So with the left arrow key on the keyboard, I will rotate counterclockwise. Another nice trick in GameSalad is to select multiple items and create a group around them. So I'm making a group of rotation rules. So both of my rules are inside of the group. So let's take a look at our rocket. When I press the right arrow key, it rotates to the right. When I press the left arrow key, it rotates to the left. So I'm going to create another rule that allows me to thrust in the direction of my rotation. I'll use the space bar to initiate thrust. And thrust, as we discussed, is the same as acceleration. I'm going to accelerate in direction 0 relative to the actor. So this means that as I rotate, I'll be able to thrust in the direction of my rotation and fly around the screen. Additionally, I created a secondary graphic called Rocket Thrust, so I can add a behavior to my rocket inside the thrust rule that allows me to change the image to rocket thrust whenever I initiate the thrust. However, see what happens. The little flame at the back of the rocket does not go away. I need to say, when I'm not pressing the space key, change the image back. And that's what the otherwise section of the rule is for. Looking at the entire thrust rule, I say thrust, when actor receives event key space, accelerate and change the image. Otherwise, meaning when the space bar is not being pressed, I change image back to the standard rocket. Now, when the spacebar is depressed, I have a flame, but when I let it go, I revert to the standard rocket graphic. In the classic arcade game upon which this is based, the screen wraps around. So when the rocket passes off the right edge of the screen, it returns on the left side of the screen. So this is different than the bouncing off the edge or stopping at the edge model we've been looking at. And this is a rule that you should study carefully because it's going to be important for many objects in this game, and possibly in your games as well. This is an attribute rule. We're looking at, to begin with, the X position of the rocket. That's its horizontal position on the screen. We can begin by saying, when the X position of the rocket is less than 0. Now what does that mean? Well, if the lower left-hand corner of the screen is 0, 0, and the X decreases as our object moves to the left, when our X position is less than 0, that means we have passed off the left edge of the screen. So what do we want to happen when we pass off the left edge of the screen? We want to reappear on the right edge of the screen. So we're going to use a change attribute to change that same attribute, the rocket's X position, to be equal to the right edge of the screen. And we know that the right edge of the screen can be found by looking at the game display size width. So if the width of the display size is 800 pixels, then game display size width would be 800. So what we're saying here is, if the X position becomes less than 0, in other words, if the rocket passes off the left edge of the screen, make it jump to the right edge of the screen. Let's see how this works. I'm going to rotate around, thrust off of the left edge of the screen, and I reappear on the right edge of the screen. If this is not making sense to you, stop the video, go back, and take a look at this section again, because this is an important concept to understand before we make the 3 additional rules we need to handle the right edge, the top, and the bottom of the screen. I'll call this rule left edge, and I'm going to use that same trick. I'm going to hold down the Option key, click, and drag to make my right edge rule. So take a moment right now and in your mind simulate, knowing what the left edge rule is, what might the right edge rule be? The right edge rule is going to be looking at when the X position of the rocket is greater than the right edge of the screen. So the right edge will be when the attribute self-position X is greater than the right edge of the screen, which is the game display size width. Whatever device you're on, the computer will put the correct value into this space. The computer knows the size of the display. And we want to change that attribute to 0 to make the rocket jump back to the left side of the screen. I'm going to take both of these, create a group around them, and call that group edge rules. Now I have 2 edge rules inside my edge rule group. Let's take a look at that. When I pass off of the right side of the screen, I come back on the left. When I pass off of the left side of the screen, I come back on the right. I'll take my left edge rule, Option drag it to copy it, and call it the bottom edge. So the bottom edge of the screen is where Y equals 0. So rather than self-position X, we'll look at the rocket's position Y and say when that's less than 0, we will change it, the rocket's position Y, to not the game display size width, but the game display size height. So when you pass off the bottom of the screen, jump to the top of the screen. I'm going to Option drag my bottom edge to create my top edge rule. and say when my Y position is greater than the game display size height. In other words, when we pass off the top edge of the screen, jump us to Y equals 0, which is the bottom edge of the screen. So now I have my 4 edge rules inside the edge rules group. When I pass off the top, I reappear at the bottom. When I pass off the bottom, I reappear at the top. And now all 4 of our rules should be in effect. Save your work. I'm going to call it squares for reasons we'll see in a moment. And we'll just add one more step before we complete this tutorial. We're going to have some opponents that we're going to need to shoot at. And so I've created a bullet image that we can use as an actor. I'm going to temporarily drag it on the screen to see how big it is. It's too big. I'm going to delete it from the stage and just set it to a smaller size, 5 by 5 pixels perhaps. Drag it onto the screen again. There, that seems like an appropriate bullet size for my ship. I'm going to create a new rule that allows me to shoot. I'll make it another key rule, and I'll use the A key to fire. When actor receives event key A, I will use the spawn actor rule to spawn my bullet. And I'm going to spawn my actor not at the center, but slightly to the right of center, so that the bullet appears to be coming from the tip of the rocket rather than from the center of the rocket. This is not an important detail, but I find it makes the game look a little bit better. And then my bullet will have a very simple rule, which will be to move in direction 0 relative to the actor. So when I hit A, bullets are fired. Now you can see my bullet's not quite emerging from the tip of the rocket, so I'm going to increase this X position slightly, and now my bullets emerge exactly from the tip of the rocket, and they fly off in the direction in which I'm pointing. I'll name this rule Fire Bullet. So just to review, the rules we've created so far are rotate left and rotate right, thrust using the spacebar, which also changes the image to rocket thrust and changes the image back when we're not thrusting. Our 4 edge rules that allow us to pass off the edge of the screen and reappear on the other side, and our shooting rule that allows us to spawn a bullet. And we'll put some opponents in the second tutorial. Thanks for watching.